How does it feel to be useless, Mom? My daughter mocked me in front of her in-laws. Everyone laughed. I smiled calmly. Wonderful, because I just canceled your rent payment. Her face drained. Her husband turned to her, confused. Rent? You told me we bought that house. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me take you back to how we got to this moment. Because, honey, this story has layers like a wedding cake, and it's about to get just as messy. I'm Linda Morrison, 58 years old, and I've been financially supporting my daughter Rebecca for longer than I care to admit. What started as helping a young couple get on their feet had somehow morphed into me being their personal ATM. But that Tuesday evening at the family barbecue, everything changed. Rebecca had invited me to what she called a casual family dinner with her husband Mark's relatives. I'd driven 40 minutes through Chicago traffic, bringing a homemade apple pie and wearing my best summer dress. I wanted to make a good impression on Mark's family. After all, I'd only met them briefly at the wedding 2 years ago. The gathering was in Mark's uncle's backyard, one of those sprawling suburban affairs with a pool and professional landscaping. About 20 people milled around, drinks in hand, the smell of grilled burgers filling the evening air. Mark's family seemed nice enough, loud, boisterous, the kind of people who spoke with their hands and interrupted each other constantly. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. I helped Rebecca arrange the food on the picnic tables, complimented Mark's aunt on her potato salad, and made small talk with his cousins about the weather and traffic. I felt included, wanted even. That changed when Mark's uncle Tony raised his beer bottle for a toast. I want to thank Mark and Rebecca for hosting this beautiful gathering, Tony began, his voice carrying across the yard, and especially Rebecca for being such a gracious homeowner. It takes real maturity to buy a house at 26. Everyone nodded approvingly. I felt a surge of pride for my daughter until I heard what came next. Unlike some people our age who still live with their parents, Rebecca added with a laugh, gesturing toward Mark's youngest cousin. I mean, how embarrassing would that be? More laughter. I maintained my smile, though something felt off. Well, it helps when you have responsible parents who taught you financial independence, Mark's mother chimed in. Not like those helicopter parents who enable their children by paying for everything. Rebecca nodded enthusiastically. Oh, I totally agree. My mom always taught me to be self-sufficient. Right, Mom? All eyes turned to me. I nodded uncertainly, something cold settling in my stomach. That's why Rebecca was so smart to buy her house young instead of throwing money away on rent, Tony continued. Building equity, smart investments. That's how you build generational wealth. The conversation continued around me, but I'd stopped listening, because I knew, with absolute certainty, that Rebecca hadn't bought any house. I'd been paying her rent for 18 months. Every month, $2,200 transferred from my account to hers, supposedly for their apartment in Lincoln Park. I excused myself to the bathroom, my mind racing. When I returned, Mark's uncle was regaling the group with stories about his own first home purchase. The key is having a solid down payment, he was saying. These young people today want everything handed to them. But Rebecca here, she saved every penny, worked 2 jobs, showed real character. Actually, Mark added proudly, Rebecca managed to save enough for 20% down. No PMI, better interest rates. She really knew what she was doing. Rebecca beamed at the praise. And that's when something snapped inside me. Because I knew Rebecca's savings account had exactly $400 in it. I knew because I'd co-signed for it when she was 18. I knew because she'd borrowed money from me just last month for car repairs. I knew because I'd been her financial safety net for her entire adult life. The lies kept flowing. Rebecca told everyone about choosing between granite and quartz countertops. Mark described their mortgage shopping process. Someone asked about property taxes, and Rebecca answered knowledgeably, spinning an elaborate fiction about escrow accounts and homeowners insurance. With each word, my anger grew. Not just at the lies, but at the casual way my financial support was being erased from their narrative. The months I'd worked overtime to help with their rent, the vacation I'd skipped to cover their security deposit, the retirement money I'd dipped into when Mark lost his job last spring. None of it existed in this version of their story. How does it feel to be useless, Mom? Rebecca said suddenly, her voice cutting through my thoughts. The conversation had shifted while I'd been processing, and somehow I'd become the target. I mean, it must be nice not having anyone depend on you financially. The backyard fell silent except for the hum of the pool filter. 20 pairs of eyes stared at me, some sympathetic, others amused. Mark looked uncomfortable, but he didn't defend me. Rebecca's smile was sharp, triumphant, and in that moment, sitting on a plastic chair in a stranger's backyard, watching my daughter publicly humiliate me for the crime of being generous, I made a decision that would change everything. I smiled calmly and reached for my phone. The silence stretched for exactly 12 seconds. I counted them. Mark's face went through several color changes, settling on a sickly green that reminded me of hospital walls. Rebecca's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Rent," Mark repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Rebecca, what's she talking about?" Tony set down his beer bottle with unnecessary force. "I'm confused here. Didn't you just tell us about your mortgage payments?" Oh, this was delicious. I could practically see the wheels turning in Rebecca's head as she tried to calculate how to salvage the situation. But there's no graceful way to explain away 18 months of deception. "Mom's obviously confused," Rebecca said quickly, forcing a laugh that sounded like nails on a chalkboard. "You know how older people sometimes get things mixed up." Older people? I was 58, not 88, and my memory was sharper than her integrity. "Mixed up about transferring $2,200 every month?" I asked pleasantly, scrolling through my phone to find my banking app. "That's oddly specific for confusion." Mark's mother leaned forward. "Rebecca, dear, what exactly is going on here?" Rebecca shot me a look that could have melted steel. "Mom, can we discuss this privately?" "Oh, I think we've moved past private discussions," I said, standing up and brushing imaginary crumbs off my dress. "Especially since you just spent the last hour telling everyone how financially independent you are." The crowd around us had grown completely silent. Someone's burger was burning on the grill, but nobody moved to flip it. This was better entertainment than anything Netflix had to offer. "Show them the lease, Rebecca," I suggested helpfully. "Or the mortgage documents. I'm sure Mark's family would love to see the paperwork for this house you supposedly bought." Mark turned to his wife with an expression I recognized from my own marriage, the look of a man realizing he'd been living with a stranger. "Rebecca," he said carefully, "please tell me you didn't lie about buying our place." "It's complicated," she began, but Tony cut her off. "How complicated can it be? Either you own a house or you rent an apartment. Either your mother pays your bills or she doesn't." I had to admit, I was starting to like Tony. Rebecca's carefully constructed facade was crumbling faster than cookies in milk. Her voice rose an octave as desperation crept in. "Fine. Yes, Mom helps with rent sometimes, but it's temporary and we're working on becoming independent." "Sometimes?" I laughed, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. 18 months is sometimes? Mark's face had progressed from green to gray. "You told me your grandmother left you money. You said that's how we could afford the Lincoln Park apartment." "She did leave me money," Rebecca protested weakly. $50 and a china set, I clarified, "which you sold on eBay for rent money in month 3. The dominoes were falling beautifully. Mark's uncle crossed his arms, his expression stern. "So let me get this straight. You've been lying to my nephew about your financial situation, letting him believe you owned property, while secretly taking money from your mother to pay rent?" "It's not like that," Rebecca said, but her voice lacked conviction. "What is it like then?" Mark's mother asked, her tone icy. I decided this was the perfect moment to twist the knife. "Oh, it gets better. Should I tell them about the credit cards I've paid off? The car loan I co-signed? The wedding I funded because you claimed your budget was tight?" Rebecca's face flushed red. "Mom, stop. Why should I stop? You certainly didn't stop when you were entertaining these lovely people with stories about your financial wisdom." I turned to address the group. "Did she mention that I paid for their honeymoon too?" Cabo was beautiful, according to the photos she posted. Mark slowly turned to stare at his wife. "You told me you'd saved for that trip for 2 years." "Technically, I did save for it," Rebecca said desperately. "I saved Mom's money in our vacation account." Even I winced at that logic. Tony shook his head in disgust. "Young lady, do you have any idea how this reflects on our family? Mark's been bragging about his financially successful wife to everyone at the construction company. And I've been telling my book club what a smart daughter I raised," I added. Guess we were both wrong. Mark stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the concrete patio. I need to process this. Rebecca, we're going home. Now. Mark, wait. Now, Rebecca. As they gathered their things, Rebecca pulled me aside. Her earlier confidence had evaporated completely, replaced by panic. Mom, I can explain everything. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The pressure to lie to your husband for 18 months? The pressure to fit in with his family. They have money, expectations. I couldn't tell them I needed help. I studied my daughter's face, seeing clearly for the first time in years. So, you decided to humiliate me instead? I didn't mean, you called me useless, Rebecca, in front of strangers. You erased every sacrifice I've made for you and then mocked me for being burden-free. My voice was calm, but my words cut deep. Well, congratulations. You're about to become truly independent. What do you mean? I smiled sweetly. Exactly what I said. Your rent payment was due yesterday. I canceled the transfer this morning. Rebecca's eyes widened. You can't do that. We'll be evicted. That sounds like a problem for a financially independent homeowner to solve. The drive home gave me 43 minutes to think about what I'd just done. And for the first time in months, I felt completely, brilliantly free. My phone started ringing before I even reached my apartment. Rebecca's ringtone. Money. That's what I want. By Barrett Strong, which had seemed hilarious when I set it up. Now it felt prophetic. I let it go to voicemail, then it rang again. And again. By the time I'd changed into comfortable clothes and poured myself a generous glass of wine, I had 7 missed calls and 4 text messages. The texts were a masterclass in manipulation tactics. Mom, please call me. There's been a misunderstanding. I know you're upset, but this affects Mark too. You're punishing him for my mistakes. Please don't do this. We can work something out. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Please call me. I deleted them all without responding. The 8th call came while I was heating up leftover Chinese food. This time I answered. Hi, honey. Mom, thank God. Listen, I know I messed up tonight. But, Rebecca, stop. Let me ask you something. How long did you think you could keep lying to Mark? Silence. Seriously, I'm curious. What was your long-term plan? Were you going to fake mortgage payments for 30 years? Pretend to build equity? Maybe stage a few home improvement projects? I was going to tell him eventually. When? After I died, and he wondered why there was no house in your inheritance? Mom, that's morbid. What's morbid is a 28-year-old woman lying to her husband about basic financial facts. I sat down with my lo mein, using my chopsticks to emphasize my points. Do you have any idea how this reflects on how I raised you? This isn't about you. Oh, but it is, because for 18 months I've been enabling this lie. I've been complicit in your deception. And tonight, you made me pay for it by publicly humiliating me. I said I was sorry. No, Rebecca, you said there was a misunderstanding. You said you messed up. You said you were wrong. But you haven't actually apologized for calling me useless. Another silence. You haven't apologized for lying to your husband or to his family. You haven't apologized for taking credit for achievements you didn't earn. You're only sorry you got caught. That's not fair. What's not fair is me working 60-hour weeks to cover your rent while you play house and pretend to be financially independent. My voice was getting sharper, but I didn't care. What's not fair is me explaining to my friends why I can't afford to join them on vacation because I'm supporting my adult daughter's lifestyle. I never asked you to do that. You didn't have to ask. You just took. For 18 months, you took my money, my sacrifices, my retirement savings, and then acted like I was the problem. I could hear Mark's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. Mark wants to talk to you, Rebecca said. Put him on. There was a rustling sound as the phone changed hands. Mrs. Morrison? This is Mark. Hello, Mark. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Ma'am, I need to ask you directly. Has Rebecca been honest with me about anything financial? I sighed. Poor kid. He sounded devastated. Mark, your wife is a good person with terrible judgment and a pathological need to impress people. But to answer your question, no, not really. The house, the savings, the grandmother's money, all lies? All lies. The car loan? I co-signed it. She couldn't qualify on her own. The credit cards she said she paid off? I paid them off. Twice. There was a long pause. When Mark spoke again, his voice was strained. Mrs. Morrison, I need to know exactly how much money you've given us. I need to understand what we actually owe. I respected that. A man facing the truth and wanting to make it right. Hold on, let me get my records. I spent the next 20 minutes walking Mark through a detailed accounting of Rebecca's financial reality. The rent payments, the car loan, the credit card debts, the wedding costs, the honeymoon, the emergency loans for everything from veterinary bills to furniture purchases. The total was $47,300. Jesus Christ, Mark whispered. Mark, I want you to know that I don't expect repayment. The money was given freely, even if the circumstances weren't honest. That's not the point. Ma'am, the point is that I've been living a lie for 18 months. I've been making decisions based on false information. Rebecca was crying in the background now. Good. Maybe some consequences would teach her that actions have outcomes. What happens now with the rent? Mark asked. That's between you and your landlord. I'm officially out of the Rebecca support business. I understand. And Mrs. Morrison, I'm sorry about tonight. What Rebecca said was inexcusable. Thank you, Mark. You're a good man. You deserve better than lies. After I hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment, eating Chinese food and feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete control over my own finances. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Janet. How was the family dinner? I replied, educational. Rebecca learned about consequences. Mark learned about truth. I learned about boundaries. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Should I ask? Tomorrow. Right now, I'm enjoying the most expensive Chinese takeout of my life. Expensive? It only cost me $47,300 and 18 months of self-respect. Linda, what did you do? I smiled and set down my phone. What I did was remember that being a good mother didn't mean being a doormat. And Rebecca was about to learn the difference between supporting your children and enabling their deception. I woke up Wednesday morning, feeling lighter than I had in months. No automatic anxiety about Rebecca's financial crises. No mental calculations about my dwindling savings account. No checking my phone for the monthly emergency that would require immediate financial assistance. Just coffee, quiet, and the unprecedented luxury of my own money staying in my own bank account. The peaceful morning lasted exactly until 7:23 a.m. when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Rebecca holding what appeared to be a bakery box and wearing the same outfit she'd had on last night. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged. She looked like she'd slept in her car. I opened the door, but left the chain lock engaged. Good morning, sweetheart. You look terrible. Mom, please. I brought your favorite Danish from that place on Clark Street. The place that charges $12 for pastry? How'd you afford that? Her face crumpled. Can I please come in? We need to talk. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the chain. Rebecca stumbled into my living room and collapsed onto my couch like she'd run a marathon. Mark kicked me out, she announced. Did he? He said he needs time to think about our marriage. He said he can't trust me. I poured myself coffee and sat across from her. Can he? That's not the point. Rebecca, that's literally the only point. Trust is the foundation of marriage. You've been lying to him about fundamental aspects of your life. I was protecting him. From what? Reality? She opened the bakery box with shaking hands. From feeling like a failure. Mark's family has money, success, his cousins own businesses, his sister's a lawyer. I didn't want him to be embarrassed by having a wife who couldn't afford her own rent. So instead, you let him be embarrassed by having a wife who lies. I was going to tell him. When? Rebecca, after you ran out of family members to manipulate? She bit into a Danish, her eyes filling with tears. I know I messed up, but Mom, you can't just cut me off. Where am I supposed to live? I assume the same place you've been living for 18 months. Did Mark throw you out of the apartment too? No, but I can't afford the rent without your help. Then I suggest you find a place you can afford. There is nowhere I can afford. Do you know what rent costs in Chicago? I set down my coffee cup carefully. Rebecca, you're 28 years old. You have a college degree and 2 years of work experience. If you can't afford to live independently, that's a problem you need to solve. How? I barely make enough to cover groceries and car insurance. Get a better job, get a second job, get a roommate, downsize to a cheaper neighborhood, do what every other young person does when they're starting out. But I'm your daughter. Yes, and I love you. But love doesn't mean I'm obligated to fund your lifestyle indefinitely. Rebecca stood up abruptly, her composure finally cracking completely. Fine. You want to throw away your only child over money? Go ahead. But don't expect me to come crawling back when you're old and lonely and need someone to take care of you. I actually laughed. Honey, I've been lonely for 18 months. Every time I wanted to make plans, I had to check if you needed money first. Every time I wanted to buy something for myself, I had to make sure your rent was covered. You want to know what lonely feels like? It's working overtime to pay someone else's bills while they lie about their accomplishments. I never asked you to work overtime. You didn't have to ask. You just created crisis after crisis that required immediate financial solutions. The broken transmission, the emergency dental work, the surprise tax bill, the wedding vendor who needed payment up front. 18 months of manufactured urgency. Rebecca's face went pale. Those weren't manufactured. Those were real problems. Were they? Because I'm starting to wonder how many of those emergencies were actual emergencies and how many were convenient timing. You think I lied about needing dental work? I think you've been lying about so many things that I don't know what to believe anymore. The silence stretched between us. Rebecca stared at me like she was seeing a stranger, which was fair because I felt like one too. So that's it? She finally asked. You're just done being my mother? I'm done being your ATM. There's a difference. Not to me. And there it was. The truth that had been lurking beneath 18 months of financial manipulation. To Rebecca, my value as a mother was directly tied to my willingness to write checks. Then I guess we understand each other perfectly, I said quietly. Rebecca gathered her purse and headed for the door. Mark was right about you. He said you were cold. When did Mark say that? She paused, her hand on the doorknob. Last night, after you left. He said anyone who would humiliate their own daughter in public must have ice water in their veins. I felt a flash of hurt, then anger. Interesting, because when I spoke to Mark later, he apologized for your behavior and thanked me for being honest about our financial arrangement. Rebecca's shoulders sagged. That was before he had time to think about it, or before you had time to spin the story and make yourself the victim. She turned to face me one last time. I'm your daughter, Mom, your only child. When I needed help, you should have helped me unconditionally. I did help you, Rebecca. For 18 months, I helped you live above your means, lie to your husband, and avoid the consequences of your choices. That wasn't unconditional love. That was unconditional enabling. What's the difference? Love helps you become better. Enabling helps you stay the same. After she left, I sat in my quiet apartment and realized something profound. For the first time in months, I wasn't worried about Rebecca's problems. Instead, I was excited about my possibilities. The next few days passed in blissful silence. No frantic phone calls about overdue bills. No emergency requests for grocery money. No detailed explanations about why her car insurance had suddenly doubled or why her credit card company was being unreasonable about payment due dates. I spent Thursday evening going through my finances. My actual finances, not the complicated web of Rebecca-related obligations I'd been managing. The numbers were both better and worse than I'd expected. Better because without Rebecca's monthly drain, I had more disposable income than I'd seen in 2 years. Worse because I realized how much of my retirement savings I'd depleted keeping her afloat. $47,300 might not sound like much to some people, but when you're 58 and staring at Social Security calculations, it represents months of financial security, years of small comforts, the difference between aging gracefully and aging worried. But there was something else in those bank statements that caught my attention, something that made my blood run cold. In the 18 months I'd been supporting Rebecca, she'd made some interesting purchases that didn't align with someone struggling to pay rent. $800 at Nordstrom, $600 at Williams-Sonoma, $100 to $200 for what appeared to be a weekend getaway to Wisconsin Dells, a trip I'd never heard about, multiple charges at expensive restaurants, a gym membership that cost more than most people's car payments, and most infuriatingly, a $300 spa day The same week she'd called me crying about not having money for groceries. I sat back in my desk chair, pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. Rebecca hadn't been struggling. She'd been living beyond her means while using me as a safety net. The emergencies had been lifestyle choices. The financial crises had been cash flow management. If Mom was covering rent, Rebecca's salary could fund her want-to-haves instead of her need-to-haves. My phone rang. Rebecca's number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello? Mom, I need to ask you something." Her voice was different, small, scared. "What is it? Did you call my credit card companies?" I frowned. "No. Why would I call your credit card companies?" "Because they're all asking for immediate payment. They said my accounts are being reviewed for fraud." "Fraud?" "They want to verify all my purchases from the last 6 months. They're asking about charges I made while you were paying my rent." Oh, this was interesting. "What kind of charges?" "Just normal stuff. Clothes, groceries, gas." "Rebecca, I'm looking at my bank statements right now. You spent $800 at Nordstrom the same month you told me you couldn't afford winter boots." Silence. "You spent $200 on a weekend trip while I was working overtime to cover your rent." More silence. "You got a $300 spa treatment and then called me crying about choosing between food and electricity." "Mom, I can explain." "Can you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been committing fraud. Not against the credit card companies, against me." "That's not what happened." "Then explain what happened." "Rebecca, explain how you justified spending my retirement money on luxury items while lying about being financially desperate." I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I thought I deserved nice things too." "Too? You have a nice apartment, a reliable car, savings. I work 40 hours a week and I had nothing to show for it." "You had nothing to show for it because you were living in an apartment you couldn't afford while refusing to budget responsibly." "I wanted to fit in with Mark's friends. They all have money. So you spent mine." "I was going to pay you back." "With what money?" "Rebecca, you just told me you can barely afford groceries." "I was going to get a better job." "Were you? Because you've been at the same position for 2 years without a single promotion or raise." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "Mom, what am I supposed to do? If the credit card companies want immediate payment, I'll be in default. My credit will be ruined." "Rebecca, your credit should be ruined. You've been living a lie for 18 months. Please don't do this. I know I made mistakes, but I'm still your daughter, and you'll always be my daughter. But that doesn't mean I'm obligated to enable your poor choices indefinitely. This isn't enabling. This is helping family." "No, sweetheart, helping family is teaching you to budget, to live within your means, to be honest with your spouse. What I've been doing is enabling you to avoid the natural consequences of your decisions. So you're just going to let me fail?" I looked out my window at the Chicago skyline, thinking about all the young people in this city who managed to pay their own bills without parental support. "Rebecca, you can't fail at something you've never actually tried. You've never tried to live independently. You've never tried to budget on your actual income. You've never tried to have an honest conversation with Mark about money. But what if I can't do it? Then you'll figure it out. Or you'll face the consequences. Either way, you'll finally be living in reality instead of a fantasy funded by someone else's sacrifice." "Mom, I love you, Rebecca, but love means wanting what's best for you in the long run, not what's easiest for you right now. And what's best for you is learning to stand on your own 2 feet." After I hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat down to plan my weekend. For the first time in 18 months, I could make plans without checking if Rebecca needed emergency financial assistance. I was going to enjoy every minute of it. Saturday morning brought an unexpected visitor, Mark, standing on my doorstep with coffee and what appeared to be a folder full of documents. "Mrs. Morrison, do you have a few minutes? I'd like to show you something." I let him in, noting that he looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under his eyes, clothes wrinkled, hair disheveled. He sat heavily on my couch and opened the folder. "I've been going through our finances," he said without preamble. "Everything. Bank statements, credit card bills, receipts, everything I could find." That must have been enlightening. That's one word for it. He pulled out a spreadsheet, clearly homemade, with neat columns and careful calculations. I wanted to understand exactly how much Rebecca has been lying about, and I wanted to see if there were things I should have noticed. I poured him coffee and waited. The apartment we live in? It's $2,200 a month. Rebecca told me it was $1,200. She said the extra $800 was going into a savings account for a house down payment. There is no savings account. I know that now. She also told me her student loan payment was $200 a month. I found out yesterday it's actually $350. The difference was supposed to be going toward paying it off early. I winced. Student loans were particularly cruel lies because they affected credit scores and long-term financial planning. There's more, Mark continued. The car payment she said was $180. It's $320. Her car insurance isn't $150. It's $280. Her gym membership isn't $50. It's $120. Even her phone bill, she told me $60, but it's actually $95. I watched him work through his calculations, seeing the exact moment he realized the scope of the deception. Every single monthly expense she told me about was a lie. And not small lies. We're talking about $800 a month in hidden costs. Mark, did you ever see any of these bills directly? That's the thing. Rebecca always handled the finances. She said she was good with money, that she enjoyed managing our budget. I trusted her. He laughed bitterly. I actually bragged about having a financially responsible wife. You couldn't have known. But I should have asked questions. I should have wanted to see our bank statements, our credit reports, our actual budget. I trusted her completely. Mark set down his coffee and looked at me directly. Mrs. Morrison, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Of course. Do you think Rebecca is capable of changing, or is this who she is? The question hung in the air between us. I thought about Rebecca as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult. The pattern of small lies that had grown into bigger ones. The way she'd always found creative solutions to avoid accountability. Mark, I want to believe people can change, but change requires acknowledging you have a problem and committing to different choices. Has Rebecca done either of those things? No. She keeps saying she's sorry I found out, but she won't admit that what she did was fundamentally wrong. She thinks the problem is that I'm overreacting. What does she say about your marriage? She wants to go to counseling, but when I asked her what she'd tell a counselor about our situation, she said she'd explain how financial stress made her make poor decisions. Mark shook his head. She still doesn't understand that the problem isn't financial stress. The problem is systematic dishonesty. So what are you going to do? Mark was quiet for a long moment. I think I'm going to ask for a divorce. The words landed like stones in still water. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Because part of me wonders if you saw this coming, if that's why you finally cut off the financial support. I considered his question carefully. Mark, I cut off financial support because I realized I was enabling behavior that wasn't healthy for anyone involved, including you. What do you mean? You've been making life decisions based on false financial information for 18 months. Career choices, housing choices, future planning, all of it based on lies. That's not fair to you. Rebecca says you're trying to break us up because you're jealous of our relationship. I actually laughed. I'm jealous of a relationship built on deception and financial fraud? That's quite an accusation. I told her that was ridiculous, but she's convinced that you resent her happiness. Mark, I want Rebecca to be happy, but I also want her to be honest, responsible, and capable of maintaining adult relationships without deception. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Mark nodded slowly. I've been thinking about what you said on the phone, about Rebecca being a good person with terrible judgment. I'm not sure I agree anymore. Oh? Good people don't systematically lie to their spouses. Good people don't manipulate their parents' emotions to extract money. Good people don't create elaborate financial deceptions and then blame other people when they get caught. I felt a stab of pain, not for Rebecca's situation, but for the innocence Mark was losing. He'd married someone he thought he knew, only to discover she was essentially a stranger. I keep trying to figure out when she became this person, he continued. But the more I think about it, the more I realize she's probably always been this person. I just never saw it, because the lies weren't about me. Until they were. Until they were. Mark gathered his papers and stood up. Mrs. Morrison, I want you to know that I don't blame you for any of this. You were generous to a fault, and Rebecca took advantage of that generosity. Thank you. And I want you to know that when I file for divorce, it won't be because of your decision to stop helping financially. It'll be because I can't trust my wife with basic truth. After he left, I sat in my living room thinking about trust, marriage, and the price of enabling someone's worst impulses. Rebecca was about to learn that some consequences can't be fixed with an apology and a promise to do better. Monday morning brought a call from my sister Janet. Linda, I just got the most interesting phone call from Rebecca. I was walking through Millennium Park, enjoying my first lunch break in months that wasn't spent worrying about family financial crises. Oh? What did she want? To warn me about your mental health crisis and ask if I could talk sense into you. I stopped walking. My mental health crisis? According to Rebecca, you've become irrationally vindictive and are making decisions that will destroy your relationship with your only child. She's very concerned about your emotional stability. Janet, please tell me you didn't fall for that. Linda, I've known you for 58 years. I've seen you handle Dad's death, your divorce, losing your job during the recession, and Mom's dementia. You're many things, but unstable isn't one of them. Thank you. Plus, Rebecca asked me to lend her $3,000 to help her through this difficult transition, so her motives weren't exactly subtle. I groaned. Please tell me you said no. I told her I'd be happy to discuss it with you first, since family financial decisions should be transparent. She hung up on me. Janet, I need to tell you what's really been happening. I spent the next 20 minutes walking through the park and explaining the last 18 months of financial manipulation, culminating in the barbecue incident and Mark's revelation about the systematic lying. So she's been scamming you this whole time? I'm starting to think so. Yes. And now she's trying to line up alternative funding sources by making you sound mentally unstable? That appears to be her strategy. Janet was quiet for a moment. Linda, has she contacted Mom? My blood ran cold. Our mother lived in an assisted living facility in Evanston. She was 83, had mild dementia, and controlled a substantial trust fund that Janet and I helped her manage. I don't know. Why? Because if Rebecca is desperate enough to call me for money, she's probably desperate enough to manipulate an elderly woman with cognitive issues. I was already changing direction, heading back toward my car. I'm going to see Mom right now. I'll meet you there. The drive to Evanston took 45 minutes in traffic, giving me plenty of time to imagine the worst-case scenarios. Mom was vulnerable to emotional manipulation on good days. If Rebecca had shown up crying about financial emergencies, Mom would have written a check without question. I found Janet in the parking lot of Sunrise Senior Living, her expression grim. Have you been up to see her yet? No, I wanted to wait for you. But Linda, I called the front desk. Rebecca visited Mom yesterday afternoon. We rode the elevator to the 3rd floor in silence. Mom's apartment was cheerful and bright, decorated with family photos and artwork from her great-grandchildren. She was sitting in her favorite chair, watching The Price is Right and working on a crossword puzzle. Linda, Janet, what a lovely surprise. Mom's face lit up with genuine pleasure. Rebecca was just here yesterday. Such a sweet girl. Janet and I exchanged glances. What did you and Rebecca talk about, Mom? I asked, settling into the chair across from her. Oh, she was telling me about her marriage troubles. Poor thing, she's having such a difficult time with that husband of hers. What kind of difficulties? Well, he's very controlling with money. He won't let her have access to their bank accounts or make any financial decisions. Rebecca was quite upset about it. I felt sick. Mom, did Rebecca ask you for money? She didn't ask directly, but I could tell she needed help. That husband of hers has cut off her credit cards and won't even let her buy groceries without approval. So you gave her money? Mom looked confused. Well, yes. I wrote her a check for $5,000, just to tide her over until she can get back on her feet. Janet closed her eyes. Mom, did Rebecca mention that she and Linda have been having problems? Oh, yes. She was very concerned about Linda's behavior lately. She said Linda has been acting irrationally, making poor financial decisions, pushing away family members. Rebecca was worried that Linda might be developing dementia. The audacity was breathtaking. Rebecca had manipulated my 83-year-old mother into believing I was mentally unstable while simultaneously extracting $5,000. Mom, I said carefully, Rebecca lied to you. She and Mark are having problems because she's been lying to him about money for 18 months. I've been paying her rent, and she told him she owned a house. That doesn't sound right, dear. Rebecca said you've been confused about finances lately. Mom, look at me. Do I seem confused to you? She studied my face with the sharp intelligence that dementia hadn't yet touched. No, Linda, you seem perfectly clear. Rebecca is in financial trouble because she's been living beyond her means and lying to her husband. She didn't ask me for help. She manipulated you into giving her money by making me sound incompetent. Understanding dawned slowly in Mom's eyes. Oh dear. Mom, I need you to stop that check. Can I do that? Janet was already on her phone. I'm calling the bank now. While Janet worked on freezing the check, I sat with Mom and explained the real situation. Her reaction was swift and decisive. That manipulative little, I raised you girls better than this. Linda, how did Rebecca learn to lie so convincingly? I honestly don't know, Mom. Well, she won't get another penny from me. And Janet, make sure the bank staff knows that I don't want to see Rebecca again without one of you present. Already handled, Janet said, ending her call. The check has been frozen. $5,000 stays put. As we prepared to leave, Mom grabbed my hand. Linda, sweetheart, I want you to know that even with my memory issues, I can tell the difference between someone having financial problems and someone being mentally unstable. Rebecca may have fooled me about her situation, but she didn't fool me about yours. Thank you, Mom. But Linda, I think you need to accept that your daughter has some serious problems. This isn't just poor judgment. This is calculated manipulation of vulnerable family members. Driving home, I realized Mom was right. This wasn't about financial stress or poor decision-making. This was about Rebecca's willingness to exploit anyone she could manipulate, including elderly family members with cognitive vulnerabilities. The woman I'd raised had become someone I didn't recognize, and worse, someone I didn't particularly like. Tuesday evening brought the final blow. A registered letter delivered to my apartment by a courier who made me sign 3 different forms. Inside was a formal legal document, a cease and desist order demanding that I stop harassing and defaming Rebecca, along with a demand for immediate payment of $50,000 in damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress. I read it twice, then called my neighbor's son, who was a lawyer. Tommy, can you take a look at something for me? I think my daughter is trying to sue me. 20 minutes later, Tommy sat in my living room reading through the legal paperwork with professional attention. Okay, Mrs. Morrison, this is what we call a junk lawsuit. It's designed to intimidate you, not actually win in court. Intimidate me into what? Resuming financial support, probably. Look at these allegations. They claim you publicly humiliated Rebecca at a family gathering, that you've been spreading false information about her finances, and that you've caused her severe emotional distress by cutting off support. Is any of that actionable? Well, let's see. You told the truth about your financial arrangement in response to direct lies about Rebecca's home ownership status. Truth is a complete defense against defamation. As for emotional distress, she'd have to prove that your actions were so extreme and outrageous that they'd offend a reasonable person. And a reasonable person would say that lying to your spouse for 18 months and manipulating your elderly grandmother for money is more outrageous than telling the truth about who pays rent. I felt relief wash over me. So I don't have to pay her $50,000? You don't have to pay her 50 cents. But Mrs. Morrison, I need to ask, did you hire a private investigator to look into Rebecca's finances? No. Why? Because according to this, Rebecca believes someone has been stalking and investigating her financial activities. If it wasn't you, someone else is digging into her background. That was interesting. Could it be Mark? Possibly. If he's considering divorce, he'd want a complete picture of their financial situation. Smart move, actually. What should I do about this lawsuit? I'll draft a response explaining why her claims have no merit. We'll also include a counterclaim for the money she owes you, plus legal fees. Tommy grinned. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. Will that work? Mrs. Morrison, your daughter has 2 choices. Drop this ridiculous lawsuit or go to court where a judge will examine her financial deception under oath. Which do you think she'll choose? As Tommy worked on his response, my phone rang. An unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Morrison? This is David Palmer from Palmer Investigations. Mark Brennan hired me to look into some financial irregularities. I wonder if we could meet? What kind of irregularities? The kind that might be criminal. I think Rebecca has been running more than just a family scam, ma'am. I think she's been running several. We agreed to meet the next morning at a coffee shop near my office. I spent the rest of the evening wondering what other lies Rebecca had told and who else she'd been manipulating. Wednesday morning, David Palmer turned out to be a thin, serious man in his 50s who looked like he'd been a cop before becoming a private investigator. He spread photographs and documents across our corner table like he was briefing a jury. Mrs. Morrison, what I'm about to show you is going to be disturbing. Your daughter hasn't just been lying to her husband and manipulating family members. She's been running what appears to be a sophisticated long-term fraud operation. What do you mean? Rebecca has been dating wealthy men online for the past 2 years. While married to Mark, she uses different names, different social media profiles, different backstories, and she's been extracting money from these men. He showed me printouts using dating elaborate profiles featuring Rebecca's photos, but listing her as Sarah, Jennifer, and Michelle. Each profile claimed a different profession: nurse, teacher, social worker, and each was designed to attract successful older men. How much money are we talking about? From what I can trace, at least $30,000 from 4 different men in the last 18 months. Probably more. $30,000? She told one man she needed surgery. Another got a story about her mother's cancer treatments. A third man was helping her pay for law school. I stared at the evidence spread across the table. She told someone she was in law school? Northwestern University, according to the profile. Full scholarship, but struggling with living expenses. Rebecca works as a receptionist at a dental office. I know. But Sarah, the law student, was much more appealing to a 62-year-old investment banker than Rebecca, the dental receptionist. David pulled out another stack of photos. The surgery story was particularly effective. She sent this man photos of herself in what appeared to be a hospital bed, asking for help with medical expenses. The photos showed Rebecca lying in bed wearing a hospital gown, looking pale and vulnerable. Except I recognized the bed. It was in her apartment, and the hospital gown was a white nightgown I'd bought her for Christmas. She staged fake hospital photos? Very convincing ones. This particular victim sent her $8,000 over 3 months. Victim? Mrs. Morrison, what your daughter has been doing is criminal fraud. Wire fraud, mail fraud, possibly identity theft. The FBI takes this kind of thing very seriously. My hands were shaking as I processed the scope of Rebecca's deception. This wasn't about poor judgment or financial stress. This was about deliberate, calculated criminal behavior targeting vulnerable people. David, does Mark know about this? I'm meeting with him this afternoon. But Mrs. Morrison, there's something else. Something that affects you directly. What? Rebecca has been using your name and financial information in some of these scams. One of her victims thinks he's been corresponding with your successful business owner daughter who's helping her struggling mother with medical expenses. She what? She told a man in Phoenix that her mother, that's you, had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia and needed expensive private care. She sent him copies of what appeared to be medical bills and care facility invoices. Those are fake? Completely fabricated. But Mrs. Morrison, she used your real name, your real address, and details about your actual financial situation. If this goes to federal court, you'll be called as a witness. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed. So Rebecca has been committing federal crimes while dragging my name into it? That's exactly what she's been doing. And Mrs. Morrison, given the scope and sophistication of these operations, I don't think this started 18 months ago. I think she's been running scams for years. Years? I'm still investigating. But the patterns suggest this has been going on since college, possibly longer. As David packed up his evidence, I realized something that should have been obvious months ago. I didn't know my daughter at all. The woman I'd raised, worried about, and financially supported was essentially a stranger who'd been using my love as cover for criminal enterprises. Thursday morning brought federal agents to my door. Special Agent Maria Santos and Agent James Chen from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit sat in my living room, their badges displayed on my coffee table next to a stack of legal documents that would change everything. Mrs. Morrison, we need to discuss your daughter's activities, Agent Santos began. We've been investigating Rebecca for several months as part of a larger probe into online romance fraud. David Palmer told me about the fake dating profiles. Mr. Palmer's investigation has been very helpful. But Mrs. Morrison, what he found represents only a portion of Rebecca's criminal activity. We've identified at least 12 separate victims across 6 states with total losses exceeding $200,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $200,000? The schemes are sophisticated. Rebecca creates detailed false identities, develops long-term relationships with victims, and extracts money using elaborate storylines that can continue for months or even years. Agent Chen opened a thick folder. We'd like to show you some communications between Rebecca and her victims. Some of them reference you directly. The first email was dated 8 months ago. Dear William, I'm writing with a heavy heart. My mother's dementia has progressed faster than expected, and the assisted living facility is demanding immediate payment for specialized care. I hate to ask, but I'm desperate. The amount is $3,500, and without it, they'll move her to a state facility where she won't receive proper treatment. I promise to pay you back as soon as my law school loan comes through. Love, Sarah. Law school loan? Rebecca told this victim she was a third-year student at Northwestern, graduating with honors but struggling financially because her father died and left the family in debt. Agent Santos showed me another email. William, thank you so much for helping with Mom's care. The doctors say she's responding well to the new treatment, but there's been a complication. She fell yesterday and needs emergency surgery for a broken hip. Insurance won't cover all the costs, and I'm already stretched thin from the previous expenses. I know I've asked for help before, but I don't have anyone else to turn to. $4,200 would cover the surgical fees. I'm attaching the hospital estimate. Your kindness means everything to our family. There was no surgery, there was no fall, no hospital, no estimate. Rebecca created fake medical documents using your name and forged hospital letterhead. I felt sick. How many people did she tell this story to? 6 different men received variations of the mother with dementia storyline. Total amount stolen using your medical crisis, $47,000. Agent Chen pulled out printed screenshots. But Mrs. Morrison, Rebecca has also been actively damaging your reputation as part of these scams. Look at this. The email was heartbreaking in its manipulation. Dear Robert, I need to tell you something difficult about my family situation. My mother has become increasingly unstable and paranoid. She's been accusing me of stealing from her, demanding that I prove every purchase I make. Her dementia has made her suspicious and cruel. Yesterday she screamed at me in public, accusing me of lying about my education and my job. It was humiliating and painful. I'm starting to think I need to cut off contact with her for my own mental health, but that would mean losing my only family. I'm so confused and hurt. Could we meet for coffee this week? I really need someone to talk to, who understands what it's like to deal with family mental illness. She's been telling people I'm mentally unstable. Rebecca has been using supposed conflict with you to generate sympathy and deeper emotional connections with her victims. Several men sent money specifically because they felt sorry for her having to deal with a difficult, unstable mother. The betrayal was complete. Rebecca hadn't just stolen money. She'd weaponized our relationship and my reputation to facilitate her crimes. Mrs. Morrison, Agent Santos said gently, we need you to understand that you're not in any legal jeopardy. You're a victim here, not a perpetrator. But we do need your cooperation. What kind of cooperation? Rebecca is about to be arrested on federal fraud charges. When that happens, she'll likely try to contact family members for money, legal assistance, or support. We need you to be aware that any financial assistance could be seen as aiding a federal fugitive. She's going to be a fugitive? She's going to be arrested, probably within the next 48 hours. If she makes bail, she'll be allowed to remain free pending trial. But if she violates any conditions of her release, including attempting to contact victims or engaging in further fraudulent activity, she'll be remanded to federal custody. Agent Chen leaned forward. Mrs. Morrison, we need to ask directly. Has Rebecca contacted you recently asking for money, legal assistance, or help with what she's calling false accusations? She sent me a cease and desist letter demanding $50,000 for emotional distress. The agents exchanged glances. When was this? Tuesday. My neighbor's son is a lawyer. He said it was frivolous. Ma'am, That cease and desist letter might constitute extortion, depending on the specific language. Can we see a copy? I retrieved the legal documents from my desk. Agent Santos read through them carefully, her expression growing more serious. Mrs. Morrison, Rebecca is demanding money from you on the same day we froze her bank accounts as part of our investigation. She's using legal intimidation to try to extract emergency funds from a victim of her fraud scheme. So she knows she's about to be arrested? She knows something is happening. Bank account freezes are usually the first sign that federal investigators are closing in. Agent Chen packed up his files. Mrs. Morrison, when Rebecca is arrested, the news coverage will likely mention that she used family members' identities in her fraud schemes. You may receive calls from reporters, other victims, or people claiming to be attorneys offering to help. Please be very careful about who you talk to. What should I do if Rebecca calls me? Don't agree to provide any financial assistance whatsoever. Don't offer to pay for lawyers, bail, housing, or living expenses. If she's convicted, providing financial support could be seen as helping her avoid the consequences of her crimes. After the agents left, I sat in my quiet apartment trying to process the magnitude of Rebecca's criminal behavior. She hadn't just lied to Mark or manipulated me. She'd built an entire life around systematic fraud, using my name and reputation as tools in elaborate schemes to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from innocent people. And somehow, despite everything, I still felt like I'd failed her as a mother. Friday morning, Rebecca was arrested at Mark's apartment while trying to convince him to withdraw their savings to pay for a lawyer. The call came from Mark at 11:30 a.m. Mrs. Morrison, they took her in handcuffs. FBI agents, federal marshals, the whole thing. The neighbors were all watching. How are you holding up? Honestly, I'm relieved. All week I've been wondering if I was overreacting, if maybe I should try to work things out. Watching federal agents arrest your wife for fraud puts things in perspective. What happens now? She has a bail hearing Monday morning. The agent said she'll probably be released pending trial, but there will be conditions. No contact with victims, no internet access, probably house arrest with electronic monitoring. Mark, are you okay financially? Do you need anything? There was a long pause. Mrs. Morrison, can I ask you something? Why are you still trying to take care of people after everything that's happened? The question caught me off guard. I don't know. Habit, I suppose. Maybe it's time to break that habit. He was right. Of course. Even after learning about Rebecca's criminal behavior, my first instinct was still to offer support, to try to fix things, to cushion the consequences for everyone involved. Mark, what are you going to do? I'm filing for divorce next week. My lawyer says it'll protect me from any financial liability for Rebecca's crimes. And Mrs. Morrison, I want you to know that I'll testify at her trial if the prosecutors need me to. That must be a difficult decision. Not really. 18 months ago, I married someone I thought I knew. It turns out I was living with a stranger who'd been committing federal crimes while I slept next to her every night. She made me an unwitting accomplice to fraud. You didn't know. That's exactly the point. Marriage is supposed to be built on trust, on knowing your partner's character. I didn't know Rebecca's character at all. After Mark hung up, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and thinking about character, consequences, and the difference between helping someone and enabling them. My phone rang. Rebecca's number calling from jail. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 18 minutes of tears, apologies, explanations, and increasingly desperate pleas for bail money. She claimed the charges were exaggerated, that she'd only been trying to help people, that the FBI was making her sound like a criminal mastermind when she was just a confused young woman who'd made some poor choices. She ended the message with, "Mom, you're the only family I have left. If you don't help me, I'll go to prison. Please don't abandon me when I need you most." I deleted the voicemail without saving it. Saturday morning brought a call from my sister Janet. "Linda, I saw the news. Are you okay?" "I'm better than I expected to be. Rebecca's been calling Mom from jail. She wants money for a lawyer. I hope Mom said no." Mom hung up on her. "But Linda, we need to talk about something else. I've been thinking about Rebecca's behavior, and I'm wondering if there were signs we missed when she was younger." I'd been having the same thoughts. "What do you remember? Do you remember when she was 16 and convinced 3 different boys that she was in love with them? She got expensive gifts from all of them for Valentine's Day. I thought that was typical teenage behavior. What about college? She dated that boy Marcus for 2 years, but she was also getting money from his roommate by telling him she was helping Marcus study for law school entrance exams. I had forgotten about that. She said she was tutoring. Linda, I don't think she was ever tutoring anyone. I think she was already running scams in college. Janet was right. Looking back with clear eyes, I could see a pattern of manipulation and deception that stretched back years. Rebecca had always been charming, persuasive, able to convince people to give her what she wanted. I'd thought it was charisma. It was actually sociopathic behavior. So what does that mean for us? I asked. It means Rebecca isn't going to change, Linda. This isn't a phase or a response to stress. This is who she is. Monday morning, I sat in federal court watching Rebecca's bail hearing. She wore a conservative blue dress and looked appropriately remorseful as her court-appointed attorney argued for her release. The prosecutor presented a different picture. A sophisticated criminal who defrauded dozens of victims across multiple states, used family members' identities to facilitate crimes, and shown no genuine remorse for her actions. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, Ms. Brennan has demonstrated a pattern of escalating criminal behavior spanning several years. She's used multiple identities, created elaborate false narratives, and shown a concerning willingness to exploit vulnerable populations, including elderly family members. The judge set bail at $100,000 with electronic monitoring, no internet access, and no contact with victims or potential witnesses. Rebecca looked directly at me as she was led away, her eyes pleading. For a moment, I felt the familiar tug of maternal instinct, the urge to fix, to help, to make everything better. Instead, I stood up and walked out of the courtroom. Tuesday evening, I had dinner with Mark at a quiet restaurant downtown. He looked better than he had in weeks. Lighter, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Mrs. Morrison, I need to thank you. For what? For cutting off the financial support when you did. If you hadn't forced the truth into the open, I might have stayed married to a federal criminal for years without knowing it. Mark, you're a good man. You deserve someone who tells you the truth. I'm learning that, but I also need to apologize to you. For what? For not seeing what Rebecca was doing to you. For not asking questions about our finances, for letting her isolate you from our marriage. You couldn't have known. I should have wondered why such a financially successful woman was never included in our financial decisions. I should have asked why you never seemed to know details about our supposed house purchase. Mark was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Morrison, what's going to happen to her? I don't know. The prosecutor mentioned 15 to 20 years if she's convicted on all charges. Do you think she'll go to prison? Yes. And Mark? I think that's probably the best thing for everyone, including Rebecca. She needs consequences that she can't manipulate or escape. As I drove home that night, I thought about justice, consequences, and the strange relief of finally living in truth instead of carefully constructed lies. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't worried about Rebecca's problems. I wasn't calculating how much money she might need, or rehearsing conversations about boundaries and accountability. Instead, I was thinking about my own future. The money I'd save by not supporting Rebecca's lifestyle. The peace that comes from relationships built on honesty. The freedom of making decisions based on what I wanted instead of what someone else needed. At 58 years old, I was finally learning the difference between being a good mother and being a convenient victim. Rebecca would face the consequences of her choices. And for the first time in her adult life, I wouldn't be there to cushion the fall. 6 months later, Rebecca pleaded guilty to federal fraud charges and was sentenced to 12 years in prison. She wrote me letters asking for money for commissary, for legal appeals, for help with restitution payments. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I took the money I'd been spending on Rebecca's chaos and bought myself a small house in Florida with an ocean view. I joined a book club, started taking art classes, and learned what it felt like to have relationships based on mutual respect instead of financial obligation. Sometimes people ask if I miss Rebecca, if I regret cutting off contact with my only child. The answer is complicated. I miss the daughter I thought I had, but that daughter never really existed. She was a carefully constructed illusion designed to extract maximum emotional and financial resources from people who loved her. I don't miss living in that illusion. I don't miss the constant crisis management, the financial stress, or the nagging feeling that something was always slightly wrong. Most of all, I don't miss being useful instead of being valued. Because here's what I learned. When someone's love for you is conditional on your willingness to solve their problems, it's not love at all. It's just a particularly sophisticated form of exploitation. And at 58 years old, I finally learned to recognize the difference. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.